Aaron, please. Hello and welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, where it's a huge pleasure to be joined by Aaron, and it looks like Mrs. Aaron as well, hogtiechamp and Concordance. And I hope all of you are saying, where have you been for the last month? We've missed 2 shows. So we owe you an explanation. The 2 shows ago, I was unavailable, so I left it in the custody of the show in the safe hands of hogtiechamp, who I thought was a bright, intelligent, and technically savvy person to conduct the show. And I got back from my trip away to watch a show that lasted about 90 seconds. Hogtie obviously had some technical issues. So that was 2 shows ago, and the last show, it became apparent on about the Friday before we did it that not one of us was going to be available to do the show. So I apologise for that. I hope you forgive us. We are back now. As usual, it is a live call-in show. If you would like to call in, please send a Skype contact request to magicsandwichshow, all one word, including in it, please, the gist of the topic or conversation that you would like to raise. Alternatively, you do have the option of using the Q&A, and I think wherever you're watching it, I'm not too sure about this, wherever you're watching it, there should be a Q&A logo in the top right, I think it will be. If you click on that, you can submit a question if you don't want to actually join us live on Skype. If you have previously sent a Skype contact request, it may be that I've deleted. I tend to delete people after each show, so you might have to resend one, but we would love to hear from you. There's a couple of topics we have lined up, but before we go to those, I'm going to invite Aaron to update us on what he's been up to, and his change of circumstances, I think, is the best way of describing it. Aaron, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. First one, open up. My wife bought me this really cool ring. I love this ring because you turn it around like this. And then you can do this with it. Okay. Enough of that. All right. Our situation has changed significantly. We signed on for the Patreon channel, and my wife set a lot of the goals. We discussed them, and we set out what would we get, what would we do for people if they were to sponsor us or donate, you know, $100 a video or $200 a video, and we really thought that within a few months' time that we might be able to earn enough on the YouTube channel to supplement the income noticeably, you know, assist with the house payment or whatever. These kinds of things. We did not expect to be able to meet all 6 of our Patreon goals in 10 days. And so we're really delighted with that. So I mean, everything that we promised that we would do, we promised that we would have T-shirts for the patrons, and they're on their way to the printer. We promised that we would produce more documentary-style videos, but also videos that are designed for classroom supplements. My wife is a professional science teacher for a middle school. She's also a senior curriculum trainer teaching teachers how to teach science. And so together we are working on a project for 6th grade through AP high school classes, according to the next generation science standards, to explain certain aspects of biology that a lot of teachers will have difficulty with. And of course this is going to focus on abiogenesis, evolution, and other related topics, and we're really excited about being able to do these classes. Or not classes, just classroom supplements.
A lot of people
sorry, go on.
A lot of people, like, I think that might get some controversy from creationists, because they always like to go to abiogenesis whenever they're talking about evolution, because they think that because science can't explain how exactly organic molecules form from inorganic molecules, that is some kind of magic, and it disproves evolution. But we just want to distinguish between what biology is talking about living things, and what it's not.
But one of the things we're going to be focusing on is the distinction between organic and inorganic chemicals, because of course one of the arguments is that life comes from inorganic chemicals according to abiogenesis, and that's not the case. It comes from chemicals that are already organic, and one of the pieces of misinformation that kids get very early on is that organic chemistry is somehow chemistry only of things that are alive and that have organs. So that's how distorted the biology is. They think it's organic because it has organs. And then we're also making a distinction between abiogenesis and spontaneous generation. We're going over the scientific method and how they use the scientific method of methodological naturalism to discern abiogenesis from spontaneous generation. And my wife thinks we can do this like in one video, but I don't think that's realistic. I think we've got probably 3 videos out of that.
It's not going to necessarily be a debunking series where we debunk creationism, but a part of the standards for the next generation science standards are that you are able to argue the evidence for a scientific conclusion. So in that way, you have to. Part of it is like understanding where people are wrong about things and improving your understanding through the scientific method.
And then the next thing that we got going on top of that was that this is the one that we argued about, where she said that if we get $1,500 per video, that we would launch the Phylogeny Explorer project. And I argued this because it's not possible for me to make all these educational videos every month and also do this other thing that would be a full-time job in itself. But we've hit that goal, and by necessity we have to meet it, and somehow or other we found a way to do that. There is currently a team of web designers planning out the construction and operation of this website, and we are expecting it to become an independent entity. I'm having a meeting today with the self-appointed director of that project to go over exactly what needs to be done and how and when and what the circumstances are, where additional funding is coming from, again, because this is a contribution to science. It's a contribution in multiple languages. This is actually a very big deal, and I'm really excited to be part of this project.
I suspect that maybe some people are not aware of what the Patreon system is. I was only aware of it after you spoke to me a couple of weeks ago, Aaron. Just give a general outline of what it's all about for those like me who probably may have not heard about it.
Well, it seems to have been devised for patrons of the arts. You've all heard the slang term of the starving artist. You know, there are certain specific people that like the work that a particular person does, and so they may want to contribute funds to, encourage that person to keep producing stuff that they like. And there's a lot of cult favorites that will never get mainstream play, so to speak. But Patreon offers them an opportunity to create the craft that they're good at, that people that people want, some people want from out of that person. But there's other advantages to it too, because I'm noticing that there's a lot of people turning to education, and they're supplementing education through Patreon as well, because you don't get that from the mainstream very effectively. A lot of professional teachers, for example, will leave the textbooks alone and will go for their own type of supplements.
There's all this fighting over what's in the textbooks, but most good science teachers don't use textbooks. Science is about experimentation and inquiry. The textbook is a resource, so they're looking for things to break it, use more critical thinking rather than just reading a book and answering questions.
Yeah, and then we're also going to have the tests included in these lessons, so that it's easy enough for people. Let's say that you're a teacher and you're in this state where you have this legal obligation supposedly to teach evolution, but 20% of our teachers are creationists, and they won't teach it for religious reasons. And then of the remainder, we have teachers who can't really teach it because they don't know hardly anything about it, because few people do, let's be honest. And then of the people who do understand it, they prefer not to teach it because they don't want to evoke controversy. If they are seen as personally advocating evolution, they will actually get flack from students, from parents, and even from faculty.
Okay, there's a couple of questions that have come in, but also we have joined by our first caller who wants to ask you a question, Aaron. So we'll take our first caller, and I'll read through the questions and come to those later. Are you with us? Is it Zian?
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
Is my mic okay? I'm using the built-in laptop mic, and it's pretty terrible.
It's good enough for our purposes. How are you?
Okay. Yeah. I just recently got through my AP biology course through my senior year at high school, and I'm starting my first year of university this year in September, and I'm really excited to start my biology major. And I'm a Patreon for AronRa and was really excited to see that he was starting all these cool projects and hearing about these educational videos. And so I wanted to ask you, Aron, in terms of education, in terms of supplementing, how do you plan on differing from the norm as far as teaching about cells and evolution and let me go through a few other examples. Natural selection and I'm trying to think. Like what methods are you going to be doing? Slideshows, or
we're going to use as many computer-generated animation as we can get a hold of. I think there's a wealth of resources out there as far as visual.
Could I pose you that? Zian, could you just please mute your microphone when you're not speaking, because I'm getting some...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
As I told
could
you,
you start again?
terrible. So
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the fundamentals of science, the difference when you're talking about the very fundamentals is that we understand how a lot of these things are being misrepresented, by those who are seeking to undermine science education. And one of those things, as we just mentioned, was misrepresenting what organic chemistry means. Organic chemicals versus inorganic chemicals. If you've got children who are in 6th grade who know the difference, then when they hear those type of arguments, they're going to think that they're silly. They're going to know why that's silly. And when you look at a dictionary, if you look up any dictionary right now, just any common mainstream dictionary, and if you look up either spontaneous generation or abiogenesis, you're going to get the same definition for both, because the dictionaries insist that they are one and the same. And I have written to 2 or 3 of these dictionaries explaining what the difference is and why it is necessary to distinguish them, and they refuse to change that. Because it's common usage, common knowledge, people don't know any better. So this is going to be one of the things that we talk about. We're going to show the difference between spontaneous generation and abiogenesis and how dramatically different they are, and how only one is supported by the scientific method.
And you got to remember, you sound as if you have a scientifically literate background. A lot of students don't. 40% of students in America are raised in creationist houses. So you get misrepresentations, like I don't remember if it was Hovind or Ham or someone saying that, oh, they're saying we're the magic rock apes. That's a very basic misunderstanding of biology. Humans, of course, are not rocks, and it's demonstrably inaccurate. I mean, if you really wanted to look at it, in the Bible, Adam is made from dirt, so he would be more a magic rock ape than what evolution is.
Yeah,
so
he was at least made by magic.
Yeah, and dirt is like rocks broken down into sediment. So yeah, and it's so misrepresented. And when some people who are scientifically literate will send their children to a public school, and they get a creationist teacher. And they're like, well, I'm not necessarily an expert at teaching or understand what they're teaching at school, so they can show these videos to their children at home too, and the children can understand why, if they've got a creationist teacher, why what they're saying is wrong.
Yeah, let me explain from another perspective. Having kids that went to school here in Texas, my son had one teacher who told him that there was no such thing as a beneficial mutation. So he raises his hand and cites the textbook and says, but teacher, the textbook lists beneficial mutations. So the teacher's trying to mislead the class on purpose. And then in another case, he had a different teacher, another biology teacher in a previous grade, and that teacher said that cockroaches were vertebrates. Not invertebrates, vertebrates. He didn't know the difference between this is the teacher now, didn't know the difference between invertebrate and vertebrate. So far as I can tell from talking to the man, I think that he thought the word vertebrate meant animal.
And I taught with a biology teacher in a Christian school who thought that snakes were invertebrates, like worms.
Yeah, and one of her coworkers also thought when they were trying to do a representation of the Milky Way galaxy, they wanted to focus on the concept of milk because the teacher didn't know what the Milky Way galaxy was.
Like they were asking us to do a visual representation of the Milky Way galaxy in a teacher training, and she wanted to draw a jug of milk, pouring, and I was like, okay, you know, and as a teacher, even if
these are funny stories, but
yeah.
they're actually quite frightening. I mean,
Yeah.
what sort of qualification does a science teacher have to teach in Texas?
That's a good question. In Texas, the only qualification you need is to pass a teacher exam called the Texas, and you could get a low score on that in middle school and be a coach and come in and teach science. So science isn't really your strong suit, and you don't have to have a degree in science. You just have to pass a test with the minimum passing score.
Yeah, and speaking of
this is frightening. I know that Concordance and Hogtie have been very quiet, so I'm going to invite Concordance, because Concordance lives in the same country as you, Texas. Does this frighten you, Concordance?
Well, it's this should answer your question. We've decided to take our kids out of public school and homeschool them because it's frankly shocking what standardized testing has done to primary education in Texas. You know, my kids are exceptional kids. My son is in 3rd grade and reading at an 8th grade level. They are so far ahead of the curriculum that they're just killing time, and we're sending them to daycare. And of course, it's not the teacher's fault. I do not blame the teacher, because all of the system of rewards and punishment is based on how many people pass the standardized test. And you know, they will see their rating as a teacher, they will see their performance, their funding for their school based on how many kids fail that test. My kids would never fail the standardized test. Therefore, they don't need any extra attention to achieve that level. But they're also not being challenged. The teacher does not have time, and we don't want to accelerate them out of where they're at, because then they'll have social issues. So we're looking at a virtual private academy, or virtual public academy that uses the Houston ISD schools to put our kids into. And it's not that we're trying to shelter them, it's not that we're trying to whatever, it's just that I don't feel like the public schools are doing a very good job of teaching my kids. And private schools are honestly much worse. I know Alondra did actually teach at a private school. She can probably speak to that. The qualifications are a lot looser for private schools.
Yeah, you could be someone just finishing your degree, and if it's a Christian private school, the less you know about real science, the better. I mean, when I taught in 2nd grade at a Christian private school, the science workbook said, isn't it amazing? A butterfly egg always hatches into a butterfly.
Yeah.
It never turns into anything else. And that's an insect that undergoes metamorphosis. So it undergoes a dramatic change in its own lifetime.
Is this restricted to a few southern states, or is this can't be across America?
We're hearing a lot of people that are like what Concordance is talking about. I support public schools, I do, but the reality is that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, because while we have a lot of religious people who are taking their children out of public schools for fear that their children will learn actual science, like the state of Wyoming just refused to adopt the next generation science standards because they said that teaching climate science would damage their economy. So it goes back to the philosophy is it doesn't matter what's true, it matters what people believe is true. Okay, so you have people that are taking their kids out of school because they don't want them to learn real science, and then you have people who want their kids to learn real science who know that those kids are not going to learn real science, nor real history, nor real health issues or any of that, because they have abstinence-only sex education in this state, and they've tried everything they can to eliminate all ethnic influences from our history. They want everything white, they want everything right, and by right I mean right-wing.
Like Concordance's family, I got into like an argument with Ken Ham because he was making homeschool curriculum, and he was going to talk about it to the largest group of homeschoolers in Texas, and everybody forgets there's secular homeschoolers too. And when I got into that argument with Kenham, he the point I'm making is right there. Just a minute. Okay, a lot of secular homeschoolers private messaged me, and they said, I can't find what science curriculum do you recommend? I can't find anything that isn't religious. The homeschool curriculum, science curriculum, it dominates Bob Jones, Abeka, creationist texts.
Yeah. So what you end up with is at least half the population is either they're not getting an adequate education. Nobody is getting an adequate education on evolution or related topics, including climate science or health or social studies or any of that. Really, nobody is getting that adequately. But you got at least half the people that are being deliberately misinformed or being grossly underinformed. And
I'm keen to go back to our caller and ask what his experience was, and if he's prepared to say what state he was educated in. Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah.
I was actually about to cut in and see if I can ask another question. Or I wanted to relate to what Lalandra was saying about misdirection and misrepresentation of science. I did my final in that class on a book by Richard Dawkins called The Selfish Gene. And he makes a lot of references to ape phylogeny, and as soon as I mentioned that in my final, that I said that these are some evidences in ape phylogeny that lead to a conclusion that, and I mentioned common ancestry, and I had a few Mormons in my class that were actually pretty good friends of mine that pretty much just stood up and were just appalled that I would say that we are somehow related to apes, and they're like, how could you, how could you say that about me? And then, I mean,
I've had that as a teacher. Whenever I say that you're apes, I get a lot of, that's racist.
Was that racist? No,
because people think that African Americans look like non-human.
Okay, so
they think that's what you're saying.
So they're being racist, and that's why they think that it's
you're
racist.
a racist.
The very same people would like Pastor Bob Enyart, Denver Bible Church, cited this one paper where he said that it was a proof of mitochondrial Eve, that mitochondrial Eve was the actual biblical Eve. And I said, but you realize that the same paper that you're citing also says that all humanity emerged from sub-Saharan Africa. And he says, no, that's wrong. And I said, but that's the paper you're citing. That's what it says. And he says, well, I don't believe that. Well, why don't you believe that? He refused to answer the question. Why did he refuse to answer the question? Because he's being racist and doesn't want to admit that on live radio.
So, Lalandra, can I ask you a quick question, and then we'll go back to the caller if you want to. But experiential learning versus didactic learning, are you guys talking about that, or how you're going to structure the lessons? That's one of my other concerns about public school is the emphasis on didactic learning when
Gordon,
you know,
can you help us out? Because, again, you're using an expression that I'm not familiar with, and maybe some of the people watching are not familiar with. Just explain the
okay, so didactic is where you read the textbook and then you're given a test over the material, after reading about it or watching a seminar on it or whatever. Then there's experiential or open learning. The hot thing now, as I understand it, is flipping the classroom, where you've got things sort of the student experiences it first and then you reinforce it afterwards. But open learning is a lot less structured, and you sort of, like what I want to do with my kids, for example, is I want them to read the classics. I want them to, learn economics from, helping to balance the family budget. Being involved in politics by going and, working at some, life experience-based, hands-on type of learning, as opposed to being given a lecture or reading a textbook and then being tested on the material.
Okay. Some amount of didactic learning is a necessary evil, because we're going to be talking, most of our students are going to be having to pass these tests, and they might not be getting good enough preparation from their teacher or the system. But I would the way we're going to go about it is we want to approach it kind of like Cosmos, where you have a narrative, and so you can learn some scientific history, and in that way, so like with teaching about spontaneous generation, we're going to talk about Pasteur and experiments where they were able to use the scientific method. So I'm not just saying here's the scientific method and all the steps. Now answer these questions about the scientific method.
Yeah, we're giving
We're
an
going to
example.
show application. So this is what you're talking about too, in a way, the classical way to homeschool, where you read books and you learn that way. So we're going to incorporate some scientific history, which is also part of the standards, and we'll show how people were able to know things. One of the questions I get a lot from students is, how do they know that? And if you can show how scientists came to these conclusions, they can know it themselves. And for the experiential part, we can at the end there will be like this is a common misconception. Write an essay on why this is not true based on what you just learned, and which is part of the standards too, which is arguing scientific conclusions with evidence. And also we will have a part where where if it's possible, at the end, suggestions for experiments where they can try these things out themselves and test it themselves at home.
I like that. I mean, one of the things that I always did, and these are on more advanced levels, but to give someone, let's say, a particular rule. Let's say we're learning about phylogeny, and then challenging them to find, based on certain evidence, where do these 4 species relate to each other? Which one is the most basal? And we talk about those kinds of things. I kind of already do this stuff with my kids. This is what we try to do in our free time. We're going to have a lot more free time now. So I want to be active in my kids' education, and I have particular ways I want them to approach material. What my experience has been with certain textbooks is there's only one conclusion that can be drawn from, there's only one right question on the test, and that doesn't always reflect the reality of it. Sometimes it's more about the methodologies.
Or like,
I'm sorry, I'm acutely aware that Hogtie, with his usual Canadian patience and politeness, has gone through the first 30 minutes of the show without actually having said a word. So I think it's only... do continue, Lilandra, but then I'm going to go to Hogtie.
Related to what Concordance is saying, like on standardized testing. So Concordance could give his children an excellent education on natural selection, but if he doesn't use an example that is tested, it looks like he didn't teach him anything. Like, for example, if what's tested is peppered moths, he doesn't talk about peppered moths. He talks about the development of the eye. Then he gave them a rich education, but the narrow scope of the test looks like he didn't do anything. So I as a teacher, I've seen the standards are kind of broad. I've seen exactly what they're expecting you to teach. So what we're going to do is focus on what the examples that they're going to be expected to know to get to college and stuff like that.
Got it.
But anyways, go ahead, Mr. Hogtie.
Well, I'm always quite content to sit back on a discussion about the specifics of what's going on in the U.S. because it's not just one problem. It's not just the fact that there's such a strong creationist influence. I think that there's sort of very general problems in the structure of the educational system. So I'm going to repeat my recommendation for people to watch the movie Waiting for Superman to come to understand that aside from the culture war related to religion and in particular evangelical Christianity, I mean the fact that so much of this funding is linked to standardized testing, that's been a recipe for disaster in many jurisdictions and just sort of really enhanced in the States. I do find it interesting that in Texas in particular, there has been, sorry, not just Texas, but Tennessee and that sort of southeast, there's been such well, there's been a drive all over for, I mean, I know Ken Ham has been really pushing to sort of bring about a bunch of teaching resources to help people get their good Christian children out of what they perceive as contamination in the schools by, you know, left-wing, liberal, humanist, secularist, blah, 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 right? And I just see that so damaging for that country that, you know, people are not going to put their kids, you know, into a community where, where qualified teachers are bringing these messages and whatnot. And of course, when the irony to me is that now we're looking at, it's gotten to the point now where they've sort of pussyfooted so much around actual science education because, well, we don't want to talk about climate change. You know, there's no point in even talking about evolution. There's lots of interesting science we can teach the kids where we don't have to discuss the evolution or anything that people perceive as evolution, like abiogenesis or Big Bang. So let's just stay away from all of those issues. And those are big picture issues in science. So, and I think on a previous episode I commented on the irony of this as Concordance was discussing the possibility of taking his kids out of school and homeschooling them. The fact that now we're talking about creating homeschool resources for people who want their kids to actually learn real stuff because of the legitimate contamination of education in the school system. I mean, it's just so ironic. Last quick point I want to make is just about where this happens. I think it's unfair to pick on Texas. We pick on Texas because we happen to have three citizens of Texas in the conversation, both in this particular conversation and in the conversation as this develops in Texas. But I really encourage people to go to the National Center for Science Education, ncse.com, and just peek in there once a month. And I do it as an outsider just to see what's going on in the U.S., but this is not a Texas-specific problem or a Tennessee-specific problem or a Kentucky-specific problem. It happens in the North, too. And I think that the National Center for Science Education is doing the best job of sort of tracking these changes across the country.
Well, there's another reason that you would focus these kinds of criticisms against Texas. We can actually hear you, because you can criticize Alabama all you want to, but they can't get their internet to work.
It is not just Texas. Pennsylvania has a certain percentage of creationist teachers too.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding about this. Texas actually has this excuse that where we can say, well, at least we're not Mississippi.
Yeah, it's pretty dire in Mississippi. But you know what? I mean, several episodes ago, I was talking about a situation in Pennsylvania, a situation in Kansas. Utah has it, even though Utah is generally regarded as a northern state. They have their own cultural influences that inhibit quality science education.
Can I just ask a question of Aaron, Mrs. Aaron, and Concordance, and maybe also the caller, although I'm still not quite sure which state he comes from. Is the quality of education, or the lack of quality of education that you're referring to, restricted to science? Is it restricted to particular areas of science? Is the rest of it all right? Someone's posted in the question and answers, you know, for example, does a Spanish teacher in Texas actually have how to be able to speak Spanish? Is it just where education and, let's say, creationism clash that there is a problem?
Politics.
Or is it more broad? Politics,
no, the theory,
yeah.
the unifying component of it is anything that's politically charged. It's very politically charged right now to teach accurate Texas history. Or even American history. There's a lot of revisionism going on in what the teachers are allowed to teach, and this is a political theater process by which we enter new curricula into the Texas educational system, which I'll let Lalandra, she knows a lot more about this.
I'm going to say it's across the board that we have to import a lot of times people to teach math in college. So the math education is abysmal in the United States. I mean, we have some more challenges than, we seem like a rich nation, but we've got a lot of poor students. I believe in Texas, like it's the majority of us are under the poverty line because of immigration and other issues. So we have a lot of lot of other economic issues that affect education, but like Concordance is saying, it's highly politicized. And yeah.
And the Texas Board of Education got famous not just for their attacks on creationism, but in a subsequent year they were also attacking social studies because they wanted to remove all ethnic references from Texas history. They wanted everything to be white boys. They removed references to hip-hop and other ethnic forms of music and refer only to country western. It was deliberate and it was methodical. They wanted it to be to make it like a religious right white boy society.
And language arts even. Language arts have been wanting to introduce more multicultural literature for children to learn, especially in a place like Texas with a large Hispanic population. And the former head of the school board, Don McElroy, he said the only Chinese that Texas students need to know is chow mein. So it's American exceptionalism. That's what our legislature and our school boards here are trying to promote.
Yeah, and now you also have to think about what is the purpose of education. Now, for the religious right, the purpose is to get people to believe in their kind of ideology. That's what they want. They want a culture of believers just like them. But the real purpose of education should be so that your children can advance beyond you. That's what it should be. I mean, imagine that the United States is a company and we're competing against other companies. Now, as a company, you would take the people that you have already hired, and so that your money is not wasted, you would train those people so that they can ascend your company. Those people, your employees, are going to be the ones that drive your company on. So they should understand things. But living here in Texas, and I'm not kidding about this, living here in Texas, we have a substantial number of people who don't understand at the high school age that sex causes pregnancy.
Yep.
Come on, Aaron. Seriously?
Not kidding.
Some of my students, I didn't teach health last year, but some of my students didn't know where an embryo developed, didn't know what a uterus is, because of their of the horrible health education and apparently science education on reproduction.
I'm just going to. It echoes my sentiments. It's posted by someone. I'm not sure whether the name appears above or below the comment. So I don't know who it is. All this ignorant teaching is only helping other countries. In a few years, perhaps already, science in the USA will be so far behind it will hurt the USA economy. I think this is absolutely right, and I think it's something that Concordance has touched upon from his experience in his own work, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I've got a team of 13 people, and maybe less than half of them were educated in the U.S. as high schoolers. A lot of them come here for our university system and for
that's
research.
Actually what I was
but that's different.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to move on to. I mean, do things get better at the university level?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah. The only thing I'll say is a trend in postgraduate education or post-diploma, I guess, graduation, is that there are so many junior colleges and community colleges because it's such a profitable business model now to set up a university. We're even importing our students here, and the dollars are coming with them. And of course, the states are footing a lot of the bill. But no, our top tier of research universities is unparalleled. The amount of research being done here is probably equivalent to all the research done in Europe, just going by terms of total paper output, and that includes England, UK. So yeah, there's enormous opportunity for people in the very top levels of research and education who want to be professors or scientists. This is where you come. That is changing. I think China is starting to outstrip us in terms of new positions being created for faculty. So we're starting to get to a stagnation period, just as China's ascended.
You got to remember, he's talking about mainstream universities. There are religious universities that still crank out the same.
Yes, I made an application to one of them. I think it was the one where Kent Hovind got his PhD from.
Yeah.
And they were more than happy to accept me, provided I had the money. And they pretty much I made a video about this some years ago. I actually called them up and spoke to their dean or whatever.
Dean/janitor.
Because there's only 3 people in that single wide trailer who can answer a phone.
Yeah, I did. It's all in the video. I did some research on them. I think there were about four members of staff.
Well, maybe the difference at the university level, distinguishing it from K through 12, is that universities are not under the rule of the school board. They're under. They want to produce research that's respected by people around the world. They're subject to peer review. But with K through 12, we're all about trying to teach the kids what we want them to know in our school boards, and that's where the dumbing down is coming from.
But one of the things I found interesting, and I can't, someone will be able to remind me where Kent got his degree from. It's the Patriot, yeah. Because I approached them, and during the course of the conversation I had with them, I asked them whether Kent's dissertation that he wrote was freely available, and they said no, it's our policy not to make any documentation or anything written by our students public, which is the absolute antithesis of what a university should be all about. I thought that was quite funny. Let me just quickly read a couple of comments. I invite you to talk about them. Aaron, there's a few congratulations for you for the videos that you're about to make. There's a question about whether these videos will be available to the wider public and not just the people who are patronizing you.
All right. Well, yeah. Let me address that. The patrons that are supporting us are not paying for special privilege to view these things. They're supporting us so that we can make the information available to everybody. So, yeah, this is not a paid admission. There is no elitism here. These are just people that are pleased with the work that we're doing and want to be supportive of it so that we can get the information to everyone else. And the other question that you asked about, what was the other question? I missed it.
It's all right. Whilst you're trying to get over your senior moment, let me ask you another question, which is directed at you. Question for Aaron. Do you think a refinement of the language from the theory of evolution to the descent theory of evolutionary fact, or evolution, would possibly be of any benefit to attempts to teach the subject? Or
no, I don't think so, because even I know that a lot of people say that the way that the common people use the word theory and the way scientists use the word theory is not the same way. But when you look it up in a dictionary, really, the common usage, even in the dictionary, is aligned with the scientists. People have to understand that when you're trying to determine the truth of something, that you have to work through hypotheses. This is the way you determine whether it's real or not. There's no absolute certainty. But you have to know what a fact is and how a fact differs from a theory, and we will be exploring that. We will, so that when children walk out and then are faced with these ridiculous anti-science arguments, they're going to know right away what the problem with those arguments are.
And two, creationists do this too. They change words, the meanings of words, like to what they'll accept. Like they'll say, well, we accept natural selection within limits. We accept microevolution, and they redefine things. And instead, people should just be taught to understand what scientists are saying, rather than try to make it more palatable to people who are going to be offended.
I think in general,
I'm sorry to go on.
I was going to be brief about that. Just I think in general, the relabeling is effective. That yes, it's unfortunate that. Theory of evolution, or just even the word evolution, has taken on such a stink amongst these people. But honestly, you choose another word for it, they're gonna catch on pretty quickly. I noticed that, for example, in common parlance, it used to be referred to as global warming, and I think we still casually sort of say global warming. A better name for it is climate change, and there is a drive towards, yeah, well, let's call it climate change because that's really a better, broader descriptor. I mean, yes, global warming is one feature, that the average temperature around the world is changing. But it doesn't matter, because once people climate change, that's a global warming thing, or whatever, that's bullshit. I just don't think that rebranding, it's such a hot social and political issue, ever really has any beneficial impact.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, whatever label you apply to it.
So
the answer is education. Concordance,
this is what I was going to try to get to in this whole experiential learning. I think we're missing a trick in teaching evolution as something that someone has to accept. What I think it ought to be taught as, or how I would probably teach it, is as a set of rules, you know, Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium conditions, for example, population genetics, a set of rules that are observable in actual populations. And you teach evolution from the point of view of, let's say, a conservation effort to preserve the diversity of the, you know, green shmoo. And, you know, you've got 4 different shades of green shmoo, and you've got to determine, you know, how are those 4 populations interacting with each other? How are they changing over time? How can we interbreed them to produce, you know, a more diverse population of green shmoo? You come up with problem-based learning, and it won't be a matter of do they accept or not accept the knowledge. They have to be able to implement it. And then it's not a question of, you know, I don't believe this. It's like, wow, that really works. Right?
Yeah,
cool,
but
I know how to do this now.
Yeah, but they're still schmooze.
You're right. You can't avoid that. And Lidlandra, I totally get that. You cannot avoid didactic learning. But I think there are exercises where you can show why it is that evolution matters in biology. You put it in the context of problem solving. I think people will understand the value of it a lot more than sort of a religious doctrine that we must all follow.
You know, that's the thing. When you talk about the value and understanding the value of evolution, there's many different aspects to the value of evolution. And what but the one thing that I've never understood, and I know that this is a completely different topic, is what the hell is the value of belief in something that is not evidently true? I mean, that's the thing where I lose the grasp.
Belief makes you happy.
What's that?
Yes, beliefs make you happy.
Belief makes you happy.
I mean, a wrong belief can motivate a good action. We have to concede that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The outcome of the action should have no bearing.
Yeah, I mean, let's see where we get with this, Aaron. I mean, reality is and can be a harsh place, and if you can manage to believe in certain things that may or take the rough edges off reality, then I can see that it's a very potent force. In fact, I believe it's the most potent force for why religions exist at all. I think it's very understandable why people would try as best they can and even delude themselves into believing something that they might not really believe, or even that those things that they know are not true.
I mean, if you want to put it this way, wrong belief built the pyramids, right? A belief that there was an afterlife that the Egyptians would go to built this enormous pile of rocks, which, you know, it was kind of, if you look at it sterilely, it's kind of a dumb thing to have done, but it's a pretty amazing achievement.
I'm sorry. For the grand achievement that is, I have to confess that it has always struck me as exactly the way Concordance just described it. The pyramids are a dumb thing to do.
Kind of a dumb thing to do, to be honest.
Well, it's kind of like Dawkins was saying that a lot of people equate being a Christian with being good. That's what they answer on surveys. They're a Christian because that's what good people are. They haven't read the Bible. They don't really get, you know, they think it means that you're being good. And maybe some people, they say if they were an atheist, they'd rape people and kill people and stuff. So, I mean, it's still wrong, but the outcome is they think that they're being a good person because of this wrong belief.
Yeah. Ten Commandment Christians, right? The ones who are like, I'm a Christian because I've never killed anybody.
If I can quote Christopher Hitchens, didn't he say that he would rather trust a serial killer than somebody wearing holy orders as a babysitter?
I don't know if
Did we satisfy our caller's question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. I appreciate what you guys do, and I'm happy to listen to the show. And if I can just poof out. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take what is the top thumbed up question. How problematic do you think it is when people see education as something to do in a school and not part of life?
Ooh, that's let me.
Oh,
no, let me take it real quick.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because again, this is sort of one of my problems with standardized education. Is there's so many subjects that I want my kids to have that are not part of testing, that aren't on the SAT, but they're life skills. They're so important to success in life. Things like home economics, real home economics. How do you pay your bills? How do you manage your money? Critical thinking. You know, I want my kids to have exercises in critical thinking so that they're good critical thinkers. That's not going to help them on the verbal or the written section of the SAT. But how can that possibly be a harm? I want them to be able to look at an advertisement or marketing and see the things that are being done. I want them to understand history as a process, you know, how people look at history through the current lens of knowledge. I want them to see how knowledge is produced. I don't want them to think that it comes from the book, from a textbook, and that's the end of it. I want them to understand more about exploring the world. I want to sort of fuel their passion for those things. I also want them to do well on standardized tests, which is why we're using these sort of standard virtual academy type curricula. But we're also supplementing that with these sort of engagements, these experiential learning based exercises. And I'm really excited about it. I've been doing a little reading on how to be effective in these things, and I'm eager to try my hand at it.
I'm encouraged by what Concordance just said about encouraging or fueling that passion. One of the most discouraging things that I have encountered here in Texas with regard to education is people who say that if it doesn't directly affect how much food I put on my table, I don't need to know about it.
Well, in school, it's kind of like this system of conformity where if you are really passionate about science, you can be ostracized and made to feel like there's something wrong with you for that. And so, as to the question of whether school should be the place of learning, Aaron taught most of what he knows to himself. He didn't learn it in a school. And I wish that as a teacher, I wish that we could encourage more of that. But I mostly taught students who are economically disadvantaged, so they don't come to me with scientific vocabulary, scientific background. A lot of I mean, if you hand them a 6th grade textbook, they can't read the textbook and understand what it says and answer the question. So they need experiences to develop that background, to understand what the textbook's talking about in the first place. That's why that's one thing I dislike about school a lot, is that learning is not confined into the pages of a textbook, especially something like science. Science is something that you experience. And
I mean, my experience is I have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be particularly good at any one subject, but I want to try and understand as best I can. And this is something I've had throughout my life. And I don't recognize necessarily a home environment that promoted this, or a school environment, although there were certain teachers that I really enjoyed being taught by them, and they inspired me. But there seems to me to be something going wrong. A newborn child is incredibly inquisitive. It is desperately trying to learn. And it goes through what appears to be a process in Texas or other states where this sort of like curiosity is stamped out of them. I don't think there should be a school leaving age or an educational leaving age. I hope to learn and carry on learning as much as I can throughout my entire life, and I genuinely struggle to understand those that don't share this curiosity and this thirst for knowledge.
Well, I think every community, every nation has those kids that approach school like a prison sentence, right? Where they're, you only have to, just cross off that date on the calendar. I only have to do this for so many more years, and then I can get out of here. But I think where the teachers are good, and where governments and communities establish good curriculum, is to help do things that keep people enthused about learning. Because the thing is, this age of having knowledge put into you, like when you take a kid who's in grade 2 or grade 3, I mean, there are things they're capable of learning, but there are things that they are there are more things they're capable of learning if we can organize the material and sort of put it into them, right? I mean, people don't like that idea that there's sort of this, the teachers sort of take this funnel and just dump information into a kid's head. But I mean, the educational systems are intended to be organized to help. Like, kids would not discover long division on their own, right? There'd be all sorts of bugs and plants they can discover on their own, but there are some necessary skills that that can only be established through curricula. And I think that to sort of instill the lifelong learning, and I just want to touch back on the science education here, when you make kids sort of memorize a bunch of little interesting facts, they tend to approach it, well, I got to cram these facts in my head until the exam, and then go on to the next year, and pretty soon I'll get paroled and get out of this place. But I'll give you one little fact that I remember from science education from middle school, and that is, you can take hydrochloric acid, which is the very dangerous acid that is in some concentration in your stomach. You can take fairly strong concentrated hydrochloric acid, but you get it on your skin. It's used to digest meat. You don't want to get the stuff on your skin. It's very dangerous. And sodium hydroxide. And this is an ingredient used in toilet cleansers and in some oven cleaners. And you can mix these two things together with a little bit of water in styrofoam, and it'll produce a measurable amount of heat. And you can calculate how much heat is caused by this reaction. And if you carefully measured out the reaction well enough, you can dip your finger into the solution at the end once it's stopped heating up. And you can taste it, and it's perfectly safe to drink. Because, as the people who've experienced this before know, it turns into plain old salt water, right? And the reason I remember this so well was because we actually did this experiment. We actually took some of this poison and that poison, and we put them together in a styrofoam cup with a little hole cut in the top for a thermometer you'd put in. And every few minutes we'd write down the temperature, and then we'd do some calculations. And those sorts of things about, instead of just making people memorize the formulas, actually have kids experience those things. It helps maintain that enthusiasm to want to learn things down the road. And it helps kids get enthused about the, how do we know that question? Like, how did we figure that out?
I think what you're describing is something that tickled you. I imagine there may have been people in the class who went through exactly the same process with exactly the same experiment, measuring the temperatures, and were left totally cold by it. And I've just been sent a Skype message, and can I just say too, I appreciate you sending Skype messages, but it's not the best way of raising a question, but I will on this occasion raise it. The question comes from Quantum Overlord, or the comment comes from Quantum Overlord, who talks about the issues with the difficulty of science subjects or mathematics, and says even in the UK everyone hates maths in school, mostly because it's hard, whereas religion is much easier to understand. How are we supposed to deal with that? I want to address that just before I come to you, Aaron, from a personal point of view. I actually enjoyed mathematics. I loved it. I thought there was a beauty and a poetry behind it, which religious education didn't give me at all. I was not alone in being one of the people in the class that loved mathematics. And I also enjoyed it because there was an answer to it. And I liked having an answer. So you could go through whatever calculation or equations or whatever, you'd come up with an answer. It was either right or wrong. With religion, of course, you don't have that. It's too wishy-washy. So I think, Quantum, from my point of view, I'd address it in this way. For me, religion, much like some of the other social sciences and even sort of like history, there didn't seem to be a definitive answer. And part of my psyche wanted an answer, which is why I like mathematics. So I think your statement is a little bit overgeneralized. All right.
Your discussion of mathematics. Okay, math has an answer and religion has an answer. Math has an answer you can prove to be right or wrong. Religion has an answer that was pulled out of your ass, and that's it. And there's no alternative. There's just that. There's the answer you made up or that somebody else made up, and that's it. That's it. There's no validity to it. There's not one statement that any religion can state on any of their theology that is verifiably true. So there is literally, if you take the definition that I use, where truth isn't just anything that you say that is true, truth is only what you can show to be true, then there is no truth to religion.
And
I'm sorry, Leandra, if you want to carry on, but I've got a question about the textbooks. Did you want to comment before I read out this next comment?
the danger of having this religious cultural influence is that I've had students where if I'm talking about artificial selection, hey, do you want to know where the different breeds of dogs come from? And I'll have a student pipe up, no, God created them. I don't believe in science. And they act like this is an equivalent answer.
But Leandra, in that situation, isn't there an overwhelming duty on you, to attempt somehow to engage them, to get them out of this sort of like, I know God did it, that's end of. Somehow to get them excited and interested, and that surely is the quality of a good teacher.
I do, and I get those answers, but that's not where I stop. And I go, really, you don't believe in science? Or do you use a cell phone? Do you go to the doctor? I don't want them to see it as they're I think trained to think of it negatively, like it's something bad.
Just imagine how you would feel if you're teaching a class and one of your students says, God did it, I don't believe in science. Is that not a heartbreaking moment?
And there's this wonderful documentary on the domestication of dogs. I think it's by Nova. And there's all these scientific experiments that I showed them to show that dogs, the differences between dogs and wolves. And after a while, you can't deny it. Like, dogs are better able to read human emotions than our closest relatives, chimpanzees. And I'm showing them all of these experiments with dogs. They're just not there sitting there reading out of a textbook. And they're actually seeing how the science is applied and how we know that. You know, it isn't just something we're saying like with a religious belief, I know God created the universe. But with science, let me show you. Let's find out, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that sorry to interrupt, that dog, the real study, dogs are sensitive to human emotions better than chimpanzee or bonobo or any other primate that we don't cohabitate with. I had heard this. I really thought it was just some dog lover was making this point, and they're probably going to follow it up by saying cats are stupid, you know. But really good science behind this, and we could do a half hour on this topic. Probably not right now, but I'm glad you heard of that study, Lelandra, because that is so fascinating about the plasticity or malleability of that's brought in by selection. Why don't wolves read human emotions? Why don't chimps read human emotions? And yet the cousins of wolves or the descendants of wolves are very good at it. It's just fascinating stuff.
Because they were created. No, it's because they were created to read.
Created by God.
There's this one experiment where they've shown that a lot of times emotions, I forget which side of the face shows up first, seconds first, like the right side or left side. And they would train these cameras on the eyes of dogs, and every time the domestic dogs would look to the side of the face of the human first to see what they were thinking. And wolves didn't do it, chimpanzees, but dogs are that adept at reading that they have an instinct to look right where the emotions show up first, because it's an advantage. If the human's happy, you might get food. Humans mad, might need to stay awake. You know?
But dogs are a great refutation against a lot of creationist arguments. You know, when you want to talk about how special we are and that only humans go to heaven, right? And that only humans can experience love, and that animals are this completely degenerate thing. The people that say this either have never had a dog or have never actually known one, or they're really crappy pet owners.
Yeah, but a dog never gave birth to a cat.
On that bombshell, let me read. And please, can I just say, I appreciate people sending me contact requests with their question through Skype. Please use the Q&A because this is the last one I'll read out from Skype. But it comes from Cara, who says that she'd rather not appear live, but makes this point: Texas is important. We're talking about educational here. Because they affect the textbook market. Here in Indiana, we write our own textbooks to rigorous standards. States who don't write their own buy from either California or Texas. Big effect. I think you would agree with that, Aaron.
I did once upon a time, but that has changed because the internet has changed everything. It is now possible to write whole textbooks specific for particular states if you want. So they actually have, and so this has already happened, they've created one textbook for Texas and one textbook for everybody else.
I think the internet's going to bring really good things on this issue in terms of making a lot of resources available. One of wasn't one of the Q&A items, maybe it would have been on the comment feed I'd seen. It was Quantum Overlord had asked, do you guys look to other nations? I mean, the textbooks that are used in the UK, I mean, I would even suggest using some of the textbooks that are available in Canada because culturally the language would be a lot more similar. You may mock our differences in pronunciation, but we use dollar signs when we're talking about money. So, I mean, there are other countries that don't face this problem and don't pussyfoot around particular scientific issues. So, and a lot of those resources are available online.
You know, in Texas textbooks, evolution is there. However, they might skip that chapter.
Yeah, we actually have a legal requirement. Our Texas, what they call Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, for what the textbooks provide, are actually quite competent. We actually have really good science standards. It's just that a lot of people don't use those textbooks, and those that would, as I said before, likely won't understand what they're teaching.
On that note, Landry, you always do this to me. I do apologize. Finish off. No, you finish off first. Go on.
Okay. Well, if the science teacher, I mean, and it's not that we're over-exaggerating this. If the science teacher says, well, we're going to learn about evolution next, I've actually seen where students are like, well, my parents said, can I have a note that I don't have to sit in this class? And that is how incurious religious beliefs make students sometimes.
Yeah, there's actually a state, I don't remember if it's Wyoming or Missouri or who it was, but one of these states actually tried to pass a bill to warn parents when evolution was going to be taught so that their children could be taken out of class for unexcused absences on those days.
There we go. I note the time. I note that we've been talking about this issue for over an hour, and I want to. You know this show is live when you get things like that happening, don't you? And seeing as it was Aaron that I was addressing this next point to, I'm going to have to take a moment. I'll fill in as best I can. There is another subject that we will be talking about, hopefully during the course of the show, which relates to the religious claims for morality. But hopefully Aaron will be back with us soon. Just to remind you that if you would like to join the show live, please send a Skype contact request to Magic Sandwich Show, including in the gist of the topic or question that you would like to raise. Please, as I indicate, it's not a suitable way of getting messages to me because, yes, I have read a couple, but I won't do it. If you want to post a comment, do it underneath the video, or if you want to pose a question, you can also use the Q&A feature, which, hang on, let me just turn that back on. So yeah, Aaron's back. Now, Aaron, one of the next issue that I wanted to address was in relation to the last video that I think you posted, unless I've missed one more recently, which was in relation to your exchange with a YouTube user called Once Forgiven, Now Free, shortened to OFNF. And I'm going to invite you to describe the exchange that you had, but to summarize, I think you've basically said that you're not going to engage with exchanges with the likes of him again because it is a waste of time. Expand and explain.
Okay, well, for example, this guy's asking for evidence, and all you got to do is really set what evidence means, right? So he doesn't accept anything that's in a peer-reviewed journal. He doesn't accept anything that is in a textbook. When he says that science can't explain something, like protein folding, for example, he said that, that if I didn't explain that evolution was dead in the water. So I showed him literally a textbook reference, or at least from a lesson plan from a college course, two of them, University of Indiana and also a university in Arizona. And he argued with me that science hadn't explained this, and that he's just simply not going to accept it. He's not going to accept it from a textbook. He says they got their information wrong. Where the hell does this kid get his expertise to say that the classroom material is wrong? It's not just that he doesn't have an education. He's insisting that nobody has an education and it is not possible to educate anyone on this. So he doesn't accept anything.
He thinks nobody knows.
Can I chime in here?
Uh-huh.
Having looked at some of the things that he argues, he's actually cribbing from the Discovery Institute. Now, I don't know if he maybe did an internship there, he knows those people, or he reads those, Uncommon Descent and the Discovery Institute blogs. What you're hearing when he talks about protein folding is Doug Axe, A-X-E, like the giant blunt instrument that he is. Doug Axe is an actual biologist. And he's really kind of more of a protein chemist, and all he's done is try to tear apart models of protein folding for very specific conformations. So here's what he says. There's no way to get a flush, right? Because the odds of drawing the 7 of clubs, the 8 of clubs, the 9 of clubs, and the 10 of clubs it's so astronomical it can't possibly happen. And you can point out to him that, look, that's not the only way to get a winning hand. That's not even the only way to get a flush. So you're calculating the odds for a predestined conclusion, right, for a particular configuration that has nothing to do with the realities of the game of poker, for example. So he's confined his search criteria to some pre-selected outcome and saying, evolution evolved this way, and therefore, the probability of this protein folding in this particular configuration is extremely unlikely given all the possible ways an amino acid chain of this length could fold. There are 100 billion ways that this protein could fold, but it only folded this one particular way. I drew the 7 of hearts out. What were the chances of me drawing a 7 of hearts? Well, if it hadn't been the 7 of hearts, it would have been a different card. It would have been a different way to get a flush or another higher scoring hand. What he is completely missing out on is it's the forest for the trees. You did that analogy not too long ago, Aaron. It is literally a forest for the trees. He's saying you can't find that one particular tree that represents the forest. And you can hear in OFNF arguments that he doesn't quite understand what is actually being argued. He just knows that he's got an argument that he's parroting, and he doesn't see any solution for that. So yeah, of course it's not really worth arguing with this guy, but it's at least interesting to see the psychology of where he's coming from, where he's obviously someone who barely understands biology.
What gets me is if you really believe what he does the way that I believe what I do, why would he fear the question? Now just try to imagine that you're in a conversation, you're in a written conversation, this is a moderated forum or this is one where other people are watching. You know that there are spectators who are reading what you say. Okay, someone asks you a question and you post your response, and your response completely ignores that question. You just forget that the question was even there and talk about what you want to. When would you ever do that? When does anybody ever do that? And when the question has to be posted 3 and 4 and 5 times with the assistance, that you stop ignoring this damn question. Right? I don't understand. Why do you have to do that? Real people don't do that. If you really believe, if you had some indication that what I believe is incorrect, let's not even talk about beliefs. If I am incorrect, right, I want to know that, because believers don't want to know that they are incorrect. They don't. They don't give a damn what the truth really is. It's more important what they believe.
Oh, and what I was more interested in was what appeared to be your statement, namely that you're not going to engage with people like this anymore. And I just wonder whether, or what you would say to the argument, well, you are never going to convince this person, but those reading the exchange between you will be influenced. It's much like you debated Ray Comfort. Did you never for a moment thought that you would persuade him, but you were playing to an audience. You were hoping that the audience would pick up on your message. Are you suggesting now that you're just not going to engage at all with these people?
I don't know. I really don't have time for pointless arguments like that, but I'm going to make sure that there are ground rules set up that not only do you have to answer all the questions, and I shouldn't have to make that rule. The very fact that I have to make that rule implies that you don't really believe what you believe the same way I believe what I believe.
I have no doubt, with the limited knowledge I have of this particular exchange, but also more generally, I have absolutely no doubt that the majority of creationists have absolutely no understanding about what evolution is. I'd say it from the likes of G-Man, from the likes of Jason Burns, from the likes of more well-known people such as Ken Ham, Ray Comfort, and whatever. They just don't know what they're talking about. So, how do you start with someone that doesn't understand the subject?
It's more important than that, in that they are avoiding the question. Because truth matters. Because I think that accuracy and accountability are paramount in these discussions.
I think deep down they avoid questions because they know they don't have evidence to support their assertions. They have no answer. So
I agree with you, Lilandra. Absolutely.
Well, see, if I were to have a discussion like this again, I would insist that it's not just that I have to answer all the questions, and anything I can't answer means you're right. That you don't have the answer, but yet yours is the default situation. We both have to answer all those questions. You have to give an explanation just as I do. You have to propose a hypothesis just as I do, and we have to test both. But they don't understand that. They don't.
What I found deeply irritating about OFNF was the... Well, you played certain clips. I don't know how many videos he made. You may have just taken segments from one, but I suspect he made quite a few. And he kept on going on. Oh, well, we're waiting. AronRa is going to eventually produce the evidence and whatever. And he just didn't understand the concept of laying down the ground rules and laying down definitions and how important that is. And I can feel your frustration, because I was frustrated just looking at the few clips that you showed him in your video. But I don't know what else you can do. I don't think that not engaging with people at all is the answer. I think the engagement has to be done, if not for the benefit of the person you're engaging, at least the audience.
Yeah, but the ground rules have to include that there can't be a double standard. Right? If evolution is proved wrong, that doesn't imply your magic invisible genie. Okay? You have to propose independent evidence that supports your magic invisible genie.
I think what you're saying in general about him doing debates in general, he has the caveat. He said that he will do a debate if the person is causing harm either to the education system or politically. with their creation.
And that's not even a formal debate. That we're just talking about arguments. Now, with my rule on debates has always been the same. That I will not have a debate just because some idiot nominates himself to debate me, or as in the case of G-Man and Jason and a couple of others, they just automatically declare that I'm a coward before I even knew that there was a challenge, right? They declare that I'm running away from them before I even heard of who they are, right? I don't debate someone until other people nominate that person as being representative of them, meaning that beating that person means beating all of them.
I just want to mention very quickly, G-Man, if you're watching, I have received a contact request from you through Skype. It was sent several weeks ago. If you do want to appear on the show, just send me a message. We will get you on.
Can I fire something off here, DPR?
Yeah, of course you can. Go ahead.
I think trying to prove that evolution is a fact is a bit like trying to prove that force equals mass times acceleration, or trying to prove that gravity follows the whatever g times whatever. You know the formulas I'm talking about, the formulas of physics. Trying to prove those. How do you prove them?
Okay, I'll tell you what my answer would be. I think that it's very easy to set up an experiment to test whether F equals ma. You could do that.
But see, that's the specific. Right? That's microphysics, right?
Yeah, no.
You can't prove that that's the case for like the Earth. I mean, if you jump, can you measure the Earth?
Let me address this.
Oh yeah, well,
I don't think that evolution can be shown in such a simple benchtop experiment.
Oh, it can.
And well, you say it can. If someone asks me for evidence of evolution, I tend not to talk about the subject because I'm not. I don't consider myself sufficiently knowledgeable about it to talk about it. So I tend to avoid it. And yes, I can hear you giggling at my ignorance. I apologize. I'm ignorant about it, and I won't talk about it. But if someone asks me, what's your best evidence for evolution, I'm not entirely sure what my starting point would be, because I don't know.
Can I got to chime in on this.
If you think it's as simple as proving F equals ma, then prove evolution to me.
Multiple lines.
I have a culture of bacteria, and it replicates every 2.5 hours. All right, I'm going to put it in this incubator, and I'm going to come back tomorrow, right? And I'm going to find that the genomes, the consensus genomes for those cultures have changed, right?
But there's still schmooze.
One rare variant.
But there's still
schmooze. Still a bacteria.
Yeah.
But there's still schmooze. But see, that's exactly the same thing as proof that F equals ma applies to every object in the universe.
Mock. I'm sorry, Concordance, you mock because you understand.
No, I'm mocking.
Doesn't understand. So try and explain to me in a non-mocking way how that proves evolution. I accept microevolution.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. So this is what I'm saying. It's a futile effort to try to prove a fundamental theorem that explains everything about it, everything about a particular subject. You disproving, for example, the free energy people. The people who believe that the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah,
no.
Seriously, let's stick with evolution.
Give me a little latitude here.
No, seriously, Concordance, I'm sure that there are many people watching this program who share my level of ignorance. Not many, but a few of them will share my level of ignorance about evolution and how best to demonstrate that evolution happens. And now, yes, you've talked about changing genomes in a bacteria. They'll say, yeah, okay, I'll accept that. But the picture that you are trying to paint is one of evolution from our most humble origins that explains every life form that we see now. And a bacteria in a petri dish doesn't help in explaining the huge picture of evolution.
That doesn't show how an oak tree gave birth to a human.
Yes.
Ken Ham doesn't want to acknowledge evolution, and I asked him, why are you an ape, Ken Ham? And he kind of resembles like non-human apes more than a lot of humans.
More than most.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to it. None of you are prepared to give, not just for me, but for the audience, an example or best evidence for the fact that evolution is true.
Why are you an ape, DPR?
That's not answering the question.
Okay, you asked two different questions, DPR.
It's proof of evolution.
Okay, hog time.
You run back the last 3 minutes of this video. You asked two different questions. You asked about what is proof of evolution, which is very, very vague. And then the second time you asked it, you said, well, how do we prove that evolution happens, that is in the present, right? And it's rather easy to give demonstrations they're non-contentious demonstrations that even the most diehard evangelical nutter Christian would say, oh yeah, well of course that's evolution, but it's microevolution or whatever they say to wave it off. Of course they believe in evolution. Evangelical Christians already believe in evolution.
What I'm asking you for is to provide me with a good response to anyone that may ask me. You claim that you believe in evolution. I'll say yes. That say, give me evidence. What's the best?
What's the best starting point? You said, what's the best starting point? That's what I want to answer. The best starting point.
OFNF would not admit to. The thing OFNF would not admit to. That
no, I'm not bothered about OFNF. I'm talking about me responding to anyone that might ask me a question. I am not a biologist. I'm not a chemist. I don't have sufficient understanding of evolution to be able to give an answer off my own bat, so to speak.
You're misinterpreting what I'm trying to say. Can I just very, very clearly say what it was I'm trying to make the point about? And that is that evolution is a framework. It is a model. Proving a model is not something that one does. You can prove that the model is accurate, that it makes predictions that are useful and true, but that doesn't prove the model. The model is itself a set of laws, a set of processes that are occurring, and without being able to directly detect the finger of evolution, we can look before and we can look after and very consistently predict what is observed through that process. What we should say is not what is the proof of evolution, but how true are the predictions of evolution. And that's what I think we often lose on, is it allows them to squirm out of saying you didn't prove every aspect of the theory with this one specific prediction. And that's where I think, Aaron, would you concede that basically it was like squashing, or like bonking the little pop-ups on the head? You know, it's the Gish Gallop, is because every whack-a-mole, thank you, it's a matter of trying to prove every possible prediction of an all-encompassing theory of biology. You're never going to hit every aspect of this predictive model with a single discussion, with a single example, with a single prediction. Okay. Right? That's where we go wrong.
I laid out 9 facts and asked him to tell me which of these he accepted. He rejected all 9. Now, on further discussion, he recanted and accepted 2 of the 9. But he still wouldn't accept that evolution happens, not even in the level of dogs, you know, in all the different breeds of dogs. He wouldn't even accept even that, and explaining that you realize you're rejecting even that, so that it requires a creative miracle to get a dachshund or a basset hound out of a line of hounds. You know, so what is, you know, would you accept that much evolution happens? He wouldn't say that because he's forbidden to say that, because he said that there would be no evidence of evolution, so he has to say that there was no evidence of evolution. That means I can't present anything greater than 0. He can't acknowledge anything greater than 0.
That's not the question, though, Aaron. My question to you is, what is the best piece of evidence for the fact of evolution?
The best evidence for the fact of evolution is the one that is most easily observed. And the best documented and most easily observed example of that is dogs.
Okay. There we go.
Well, I mean,
are you talking about kinds of dog, or?
Oh yeah. If you turn it back on them, why are you Why do gorillas have hands and you have hands? Why do you have gorillas have binocular vision? You
Well,
have?
this is actually, Lilandra, I think what I would probably advance as the best evidence, and that's fossils. You can see the transitions that have been made throughout the fossil record. I would.
Those are just laid down by the flood.
No, but seriously, for me, when asked, I would say that question. I would probably say that fossils are the best evidence of evolution.
Here's the real
Not the
problem.
only evidence, but it's the one that's tangible, the one that they can actually look at and they can see.
Here's the real problem. I was on a TV show called the Blind Faith Virus Vaccine Show out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I was talking to some idiot from Liberty University. Can you imagine bragging that your degree comes from Liberty University? If that's something you're proud of, you already have a problem. But when I asked this guy, do snakes talk? His answer was that if you believe in miracles and you believe in essentially magic, then what problem do you have believing that a snake can talk? This is a demonstration. In this single sentence, he revealed to me that exactly what it means to have reason be meaningless in someone's perspective. That reason itself is rejected. I believe what I want to believe because that's what I want to believe.
You had a problem with liberty?
And as my wife just pointed out, if you don't believe that, you got a problem with liberty.
You went to
Problem with
liberty?
liberty.
You had a problem with liberty? Communist?
I got to tell you how I've been addressing the question.
It is risible. It is risible, but it's equally, if not more, disturbing, is it not? Because if people have reached that age and reached that level of entrenchment in their beliefs, no amount of reason is going to persuade them otherwise.
And of course,
they're going to have
that's
to
not the goal.
completely deconstruct everything that they believe in, reassess their whole personality and everything about themselves. Sorry?
It happens not as often as you argue it, but it does happen. Matt Dillahunty, former wanted to be a pastor. Seth was raised by people who went to Bob Jones University. Seth Andrews, thinking atheist. I was a creationist.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. It happens.
Yeah, it does happen. It does happen. And let's hope it happens more frequently. I've been ignorant of the questions. We've got a +5 question here.
Sure. I really want to shoehorn in my answer.
Oh, are you looking at the same question?
Point. The starting point, yes. When you asked, where's the starting point? When somebody says, well, prove evolution to me, prove it to me.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
The starting point is to identify what it is you're arguing over. Because I spent too long before you guys had met me, arguing with people about, well, how do we know evolution's true? And you get into details about, transcriptases and helicases, and it doesn't matter how much information you give them. If you just say, okay, here's why I believe in evolution, you're talking about the processes and the model of evolution. They just go, yeah, well, that's all religious, you're biased, blah, blah, blah. They'll come for some reason and just throw it out. But you got it, or they'll accept it and they'll say, okay, yeah, that's true. There's variability within kinds, but that's just microevolution or whatever. They'll throw it out. They'll accept it and then throw out the significance of it. One of those two things always happens. At some point, you have to say, okay, what are we arguing about here? When they ask for proof of evolution, the biggest mistake we make is to give them proof of evolution. We think that when they ask for proof of evolution, they're saying, prove to us that this comprehensive theory is a good model of reality. That's not what they're saying. You need to understand the words the way that they're using it. When they say, prove to me that your belief in evolution is true, what they're asking is, why do you believe that men came from monkeys? Right? So getting into discussions of the details of transcriptase and helicase and protein folding and all these other things, that's not what they're talking about. Talking about variability amongst dogs is a great analogy and it gets you to that starting point. But that's not what they're asking. When they say, why do you believe in evolution? Tell them upon what evidence does your belief in common ancestry rest. Forget evolution. Talk about the specific feature of common ancestry. Why do you believe On what evidence do you base your belief that dogs and cats come from a common ancestor?
The problem is you can't ask these people questions and have them answer.
No, I'm with you.
In that debate that I had with Bob
Yes.
Enyart, right? I mean, he argued that dinosaurs were not birds, right? And so I asked him, specific questions about birds. Well, how to classify birds and what is the distinction between birds and dinosaurs? And he says, I don't care. I know you don't care. That's why you shouldn't have asked the question. You don't care what the answer is.
Yeah. You know the difference between birds and dinosaurs, though? Birds inhale through their mouth and exhale through their backside.
Hey.
Okay, who came up with that?
That's racist. That's racist.
That's racist. Okay, you know what? I'm telling you, a third of our viewing audience knows exactly what I'm talking about, and they're waiting for me to bring this up. But I'm going to kick it back to DPR. Go ahead. You were going to load up another question.
I'm part of the two-thirds that have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and I'm not sure that the content of your answer would be suitable for a family show.
It's totally on topic. It's totally on topic. It's about discussing evolution with people who think they're experts in something because other creationists tell them.
Don't get me wrong. It totally frustrates me when people. I'm going to try and select my words carefully here. People who clearly have little understanding about anything, and in particular have absolutely no understanding about science, seek to argue points that they just have no understanding of.
Let those words
that they have taken from websites or whatever that support their particular flavor of religion, and it deeply frustrates me.
It is frustrating.
And the whole conversation was not so much convincing people of evolution, but how do you engage with someone who is willingly ignorant? Is there any point?
That's an excellent point, DPR. Let those words be a segue into a segment I can do called "What Happened on G+ this week," and about the farting birds. Two big issues on G+ this week. One of them was people reacting to Aaron's video about potentially not dealing with creationists having shouting matches anymore, because we're all going to miss that if that's the way it goes down. But the other issue was a hangout hosted on a channel called True Talk TV. That is, the main host of that is Aaron's old friend True Empiricism, a previous clasher on the League of Reason forums, and a new sort of up-and-coming presuppositional apologist, Arcane Truth, or Arcane the Ghost. He goes by a couple different names. In this hangout, Arcane says, he makes this observation that bird respiratory anatomy is different from what he calls other mammals, and he says, well, therefore, or normal mammals in contrast with birds, and he says, well, their anatomy is different, and he's right about this. I'm not going to argue this point. He is absolutely right. The bird anatomy, respiratory anatomy, is quite different from those of mammals. But from this, he says, well, then, therefore, God, right? Evolution can't explain those differences. But here's the thing. The difference that he cites is that birds breathe in through their mouth, and then the air goes one way through, all the way through their body, and out another opening on the other side. To be clear, he did not say that it was the cloaca that the air was being blown out of, but it doesn't matter. The YouTube crowd jumped on the poor guy and made fun about the whole farting bird thing and how they're like a ramjet. So while they're flying, the air goes through and, people had lots of fun with it. But of course, instead, what ended up happening, I guess, earlier this weekend, the three geniuses on True Talk TV ended up sitting down and actually looking it up on Wikipedia or in some anatomy website, and they found out, oh, actually, yes, bird anatomy is different, but it's got to do with these air sacs that sort of pump, and then the air goes through the lungs, and it is quite a bit different. And they went, well, that's what I meant, right? And his whole explanation was, it was like the clumsy kid falling down in the schoolyard after tripping over nothing, and then getting up and going, oh, I meant to do that, But the video is out there for people to watch. He did not say that the air comes out differently. he says that the air comes in one opening and goes out straight through the body and out another opening, is what he says. And here's my take on it. The whole thing about this is, yes, bird anatomy is different. Let's not escape that point. But how is it different? Why is it different? What can we learn from this? And birds don't have diaphragms. The thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavities are continuous, whereas in people, for example, they're separated by a muscular diaphragm that descends into the belly gets bigger, expand our intercostal muscles, it makes the whole chest cavity get bigger, and that which causes the lower pressure inside and the air goes in. Birds have a totally different strategy, and it's fascinating. The number of sacs, by the way, the wiki page slightly incorrectly describes the number of sacs as being different from one species to another. More correctly, it's sort of the number of sacs or the arrangement of sacs vary more so at the family level of organization, so that two very closely cladistically related birds would have the same number of sacs. But penguins have these air sacs and they don't fly, right? Bats do fly and they don't have the air sacs. So all of these things are things that you would expect if a hierarchical theory of evolution were true. And but they don't address that. They just heard this little factoid that the respiration is different and the air goes straight through, and that's it. Stop thinking. They don't even learn the facts behind it to get that right. They just declare evolution dead based on hearing this one nutty little factoid about the air going straight through the lungs. Sorry.
Yeah, and that's what the birds are not dinosaurs people tried to do for the longest time. But the fact is that even Allosaurus, even well-known dinosaurs like Allosaurus and Archaeopteryx and a number of others have been found to have these multiple air sacs, so that we know that non-avian dinosaurs had avian respiration. That they didn't have what the crocodilians have about or I think they've even revised what crocodilian respiration is like, but they didn't have the hepatic piston lung system that they were arguing about, that dinosaurs had this one system and that birds had this completely different independent system. No, Allosaurus had the same type of respiration as modern birds. And so did several other modern or several other theropods. They had the same breathing apparatus. They had the same. They had this number of air sacs. And there was this one grotesque experiment that was actually done, where a bird had its wing severed, so that its bones are exposed, and it was then gagged so that it couldn't respire through its bill or through its nostrils, and it was able to breathe through the arm bones, because their skeleton is hollow. Their respiration system actually has where the air doesn't just go through the lungs, but it also runs through the skeleton, so it is possible to channel through a break in the bone where you can actually breathe in and out of the bones. It's a grotesque experiment, but it's still interesting what it produced. Is that birds can breathe through their bones, and so then could other dinosaurs, at least some of them.
See, when you say, and I didn't know that about the non-avian dinosaurs, some of them at least had these air sacs. I wonder if they were also absent a diaphragm. That's an important sort of an anatomical difference. But when you say that, and I didn't know that, I wonder, how do we know that, right? This is how science progresses, right? It isn't somebody going to a chalkboard and saying, well, my worldview would make more sense if some of the non-avian dinosaurs were absent a diaphragm and had these air sacs. How did they know that?
There are connection points. There are connection points where the breathing, where the respiratory system enters the skeletal system. And there are indicative anchor points that you can find on the skeleton for points where the respiration actually enters the skeletal system, and they have found those anchor points on Allosaurus, and they found them on Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx, creationists often want to say that Archaeopteryx is just a modern bird. It is not. Archaeopteryx really is not a bird. Archaeopteryx is literally a non-avian dinosaur, very close to the dawn of avian ancestry, but it is not a bird itself.
Well, the pulmonary system does not survive fossilization very well. It's not. Right. So you're saying that there's evidence in the skeletal system?
The anchor points that I was talking about are actually in the skeleton. And once they found what these were, they've identified them in other maniraptors like Velociraptor and Oviraptor, but also, as I said, in Mungicosaurus and Allosaurus, and then even in Archaeopteryx. So they were able to find, they had to use a microscope to find it, but there are anchor points in Archaeopteryx skeletal structures showing how these avian respiration existed there too.
Okay, well, I didn't know that, and I think I wish we were going to do a 4-hour hangout, because I would want to know more about this, and I'd like to find some links about it. But I'm mindful that DPR probably wants to move on another topic. But maybe let me wrap up by making this point then. So I said what I said. You said what you said. You had some extra information on it. I didn't know. I didn't realize that they could sort of do that type of analysis with fossilized skeletal remains. So there's a lot more to learn there. But this is in contrast to a hangout from some creationists a few days ago, who one of them had said, "Oh, did you know birds are very different? Oh yeah, the air blows straight through their body." And the other guy, True Empiricism, your old friend from League of Reason, said, "Yeah, I was just going to say that." Not only endorsed that Arcane Truth had said that the air comes out another opening, and actually said, "Oh, I myself was about to point out that the air blows straight through." Like, come on, you know. And that was it. They just, you know, it's crazy. These evolutionists believe in evolution. Next topic. They show no curiosity at all.
That's one of the annoying things about talking to creationists. They have no original evidence. They often crib scientific literature, like Darwin, what he said about the eye, and then that's the proof that it doesn't work. See what Darwin said. They don't produce any of their own research, and then someone like True Empiricism will talk to you, and you'll show him the way it really works, and he goes, "Oh, that's what I meant." They don't do their homework. They're incurious.
Yeah. And I would like one of them to ask, like instead of just asking each other, "Well, isn't this weird that the birds are different in this way?" And then of course they get the way just so fundamentally wrong to show an incredible lack of understanding of anything. That's it. They're going to stop thinking about it. If they wanted to raise, they just, well, evolution can't explain that. No, let's look at the actual facts. Let's look at the arrangement of air sacs and the fact that they're different from one bird to another. And then, yeah, ask somebody knowledgeable about evolution. How does this support or contradict evolutionary belief, right? They won't look into the facts. They won't ask how these facts about the avian respiratory system impact on the credibility of either evolution or creationism or any of these things. They just wave of the hand, they learn one little fact, and evolution's dead.
And it still proves their worldview, whatever fact you give them.
Because God wanted it that way.
I had a discussion with somebody named Gear Up once upon a time,
who
made an important admission that you can use your imagination to still believe in certain things, and that's what this is all about. It is pretend. It is believing what you want to believe because of some emotional attachment. It is not remotely about understanding what is really true.
Yes. I hadn't heard that name Gear Up in a while. I'm reasonably good friends with his sister.
Is that something that you want to advertise on air? Did you want to chip in?
By the way, tell Sable Chicken I was terribly amused by the way she represented me or impersonated me.
Oh, DPR, we have to link that video. Sable Chicken's impression of Aaron is gold.
It involves a lot of black tape and. It was really rather unsettling, if I remember correctly. But I see what the time is.
Wait, we have an important question.
Oh, hello.
We have an important question. Ask the question.
What's rock and roll?
What's rock and roll?
What's rock and roll? That's what he wants to do.
I'm too old to remember, but I think if you go to YouTube and you search Elvis, I think there'll be a few educational videos for you there. Elvis Presley. That's my understanding of rock and roll.
There's an old saying that a rolling stone gathers no moss, and rock and roll is music that moves so that it gathers no moss, baby.
He's more into Sugar Loaf.
That's a mini.
You know that I'm in breach of the injunctions, Hogtie. If you have a small child on the show, I could be arrested I see you have a cavalier attitude towards your young children. But there we go. I'm acutely aware of the time. There was a topic that I did want to discuss, but I'm actually thinking that it probably will be best left for an entire show. And let me explain as best I can. And you'll have to excuse me because I haven't written this down or whatever, but this is off my cuff, so to speak. A few days ago, a former Archbishop of Canterbury called Carey, who's now a member of the House of Lords, Lord Carey, issued a statement in which he said that he would be supporting the bill that is now, it's a private member's bill, don't worry about all of that, but it's going through the House of Lords, and it's the assisted death bill, for want of a better word. And what it is proposing is that legislation in this country should be changed to allow for those who are terminally ill and obviously suffering a very low standard of life to choose, if they wish, to have their life terminated with the assistance of a doctor. At the moment, in this country, anyone who assists in the death of someone through suicide could be subjected to criminal prosecution and possibly face a maximum of, I think, 14 years imprisonment. And what Lord Carey has said is that his attitude has changed since he was retired, I think, in 2002 as the Archbishop of Canterbury. At that time, he held what is a common policy amongst religious people, that all life is sacred, and any termination thereof, whether it be at the beginning of life through abortion or contraception. Actually, the Church of England is a bit more loose about contraception and abortion, but at the end of life, totally opposed to it. And I think this is actually quite refreshing. It happens so infrequently that a religious person or religious institution actually makes some statement that I actually agree with. And here there is a statement from him which I think is encouraging. He's going to support this bill. It's obviously opposed by the current Archbishop of Canterbury, who says that the bill is misguided and dangerous, although he doesn't really explain why it is. But there have been some that have picked up his argument and referred to Hitler. I don't understand it. But yeah. Yes. This is how banal their arguments are. But my view is that there will come a time when the Church will adopt the legislation that is being proposed, namely that people in hideously terminal conditions or locked-in syndrome will be entitled to be assisted in their death. And one case that we discussed, I think about 2 years ago, was the case of Tony Nicholson, who had locked-in syndrome. He was, prior to a terrible accident, I think it was, he was a very gregarious, very sportsy, very outgoing person, and he was left in a state where he could only communicate by blinking. And he took his case to the Court of Appeal. They rejected his case, and he, following that decision, he refused food, and it took about a week for him to die of complications. But he had to starve himself to death. Now, what Lord Carey said, I've actually got it written down here, is that he changed his view, quote, in the face of the reality of needless suffering. I congratulate him on reaching that conclusion. But it's a conclusion that humanist organisations, including the British Humanist Association, including the organisation Dying with Dignity, have recognised for many, many years and have been advocating for the right of those in his sort of situation to be assisted in dying. I think it's a fundamental human right and a matter of dignity to a degree, choose the method and the way in which you're going to die. The Church, as I say, still opposed to it in this country will ultimately, I think, agree that this is a right course of action to take. And so my point, in summary, is this. If it is the case, as I suspect it will be, that they will follow suit, so to speak, what is the point of the church so far as morality is concerned? They are not leading us so far as morality is concerned. They are playing catch-up with secular organizations, secular institutions, such as, I say, the British Humanist Association, Dying with Dignity Association. What do they actually have any relevance whatsoever in discussing morality? And if you look through history, you will find that they have been implacably opposed to any change in their dogma, which raises another point, of course, as well. If religious dogma is correct and has been correct throughout, then why is it changing? Why do they need to change? Well, I can offer up an answer to that. They need to change in order to maintain their flock, because unless they go somewhat in accordance with their flock, they're not going to maintain them, their flock will leave. So I think that this was an issue that I hope to discuss in this show. I think, though, it's probably an issue that it's worth an entire show. And I'd like, just from the rest of the panelists, a knee-jerk reaction to what I've just said.
Well, me and Aaron have gone through the situation ourselves. His granddaughter had leukemia, and they sent her home to die when they found they couldn't stop it. And it took her 3 or 4 days.
It was only a few days.
And to living on polluted blood by cancer, smothering from fluids in her lungs to die, when they could have just ended her suffering earlier.
Now, the important thing here, with regard to my granddaughter, was not just that she was in visible pain and discomfort, and she expressed that. She was 3 years old. She was able to express she obviously did not feel good. But it was days, multiple days of her being unconscious, where my daughter, not my granddaughter, but my daughter, was aware that her child was never going to recover, that she was never going to awaken when she'd slipped in, and that it was a matter of waiting. Imagine you're a mother of a 3-year-old child and you have to wait for that child to suffer breathing, agonizing breaths for days, waiting for the relief that the breath will end, waiting for that last breath when another breath doesn't follow it. That's what my daughter was expected to do under our current laws.
And that's something not all of us, or most of us, are going to face. Most of us are not going to die in our sleep. We could get into a car accident and suffer some kind of debilitating injury that you don't want to come back from. That or permanent. Some of us will be in permanent pain for 10 years before they die, and it's cruel just because they think that because of the Bible that it's murder to allow someone to die with dignity. And even now in our with our new medical advances, I read this article by a doctor, and they said that these people think when they have their elderly relatives, look how many measures we did to save their lives, but a lot of times the measures they take can result in other complications, and what you're doing is, it's not for them, it's doing it for you, and you're just prolonging their agony. And one of the nurses in the article said that they were glad that they weren't a nurse anymore because they were tired of hurting old people. And people just...
I think from your response, both you, Lilandra, and also Aaron, and I haven't even heard from Hogtie yet, I think that this is an issue that we should devote a show to. And I'm also, as I said, we're coming up to 2 hours now. I'm keen to keep the shows down to 2 hours because I think it's a bit much to ask the audience to watch more than 2 hours. So I propose that this is a topic of our next show.
With the table.
Hogtie.
Yeah. I was going to very carefully dodge. I thought you were kind of asking two questions there. One about thoughts on the general topic of euthanasia, and then second about, well, the fact that the churches are expressing opinions about this, and that the churches are involved in the political discussion.
I was addressing one issue and raising one question. I hoped, namely, the issue was assisted suicide, but the question was, what role does the church have in advising us as so far as morality is concerned?
Yeah.
Does it have actually any
position
to do so? Because you understand the point.
Yeah, I do. I do think that necessarily we then will get sort of wrapped up into a discussion about euthanasia and assisted suicide and end-of-life care and things like that. And I think, especially so close to the end of an episode, I would, and not being able to follow Aaron and Lalandra's observations about it, I can say that on the topic of euthanasia, that I thought I had, in my early 20s, I thought I had a good sort of moral foundation, and I thought I knew the difference between right and wrong. And then I took a class in medical ethics that just sort of reset my complete brain on these issues, and these questions are not ever simple. They're a lot more complicated. So I want to reserve comment until, as you say, we'll table this for another meeting. On the issue of whether or not churches should have opinions on these things, I am going to express my small frustration with democracy. It's their right as any other organization. They have an opinion, et cetera, et cetera. I think, though, it's almost like somebody just coming up like some mental patient that just says, well, I get all my guidance from the aliens on the other side of the moon, so I'm gonna vote in our city council election. And you're like, well, it's kind of unfair that you get a vote when I'm actually like going to the meetings and listening to the issues, and you're wearing your tinfoil hat, and our votes are equal. But you know what? Okay, so the churches have an opinion. They do not have any foundation above anyone else's. They don't even have any foundation on par with any other individual person or organization. But there's democracy. What was the expression? Oh, I'm going to get it from the wrong person. Democracy is the worst imaginable political system, except for all. No, the worst political system that humans have ever tried, except for all of the others.
I like the way George Carlin put it. He said that he has just as much authority as the Pope. It just isn't as recognized by as many people.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. I have some other things that I have to jump into, so I'll let you close the show as you will.
All right, I am going to point out, though, I had left a comment for you on your video about the farting birds. And I even put +R in front so you would read it. You didn't read it, did you? You're not a comment follower, are you?
I try, but it's become impossible. I have to confess.
I know, you get thousands of messages, but when you see one that says, from hogtiechamp, you're going to be like, oh, I want to know what he said. I know. It's just a sea, just a spinning sea of messages.
Get used to it. With Aaron's increasing fame, I found that he doesn't answer his Skype calls. He doesn't answer his phone anymore. He never emails me. I feel as if I was just a step on his step ladder to climb on and move on to, and forget about once he's moved on to the next one. I'm bitterly hurt.
One more funny quick thing. I posted a response on one of Thunderfoot's videos about the solar freaking roadways and how he's really opposed to the solar freaking roadway technology. I posted on there, plus Thunderfoot, clearly you're just a shill for big asphalt. And I had a day and a half of people I don't know responding to tell me that I'm an idiot and that there's no such thing as big asphalt, to which I would immediately then accuse them of being part of big asphalt. But I never once heard Thunderfoot, and he never stepped in to be like, come on, lay off the guy. He's just making a joke. Where was he? Nobody reads my comments.
Oh, bless you, Hogtie. I read your comments.
Good.
No, I don't, actually. But on that note, as I say, I'm keen to keep the shows down to 2 hours, so we will end at that. Thank you for everyone that's watched, and I appreciate that there are 150, what is it now? 155 viewers watching live, which says a lot about the World Cup. Apparently, the last message I got was it was 0-0 after half-time. So you can rush away now and watch extra time and hopefully penalties. I love penalties. It's the only interesting part of soccer. But yes, we'll be back, and there's our topic for next week. Does religion have anything constructive to say about morality in the present day? How's about that for a title? On that note, can I thank Gordon, who's now gone, Hogtie, Lilandra, and Aaron, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time, which I think is going to be the 27th, if I've got it right, usual time, and we look forward to seeing you there.
All right.
Good night.
Good to talk to you again. Good night.